Peace and power. This your big brother Psych, and once again, this your Panther 48. Today, we're going to build on our fourth section of Blueprint for Black Power. This one is called Solution. We're going to build on, and as we do, and as we're known to do, we're going to debate on the ideals of what are some of the best solutions toward getting that power. If y'all haven't seen the previous videos, we have a playlist called Blueprint. And in that playlist is all the videos that we've done leading up to this. I think it's about four of them. The video that set this off, our brother Darkside then called me and brother War personally, and it basically told us that he needed us to give him some direction, some blueprints, and we're planning on hopefully we'll be able to. And this is a direct invitation to our brother David, because brother David left a comment in our last video that actually broke down some of those major points toward leading to our solutions. We like brother David Foreman, and if y'all that don't know or don't have any clue of who David Foreman is, there would be no you owe a lot of respect to brothers like David Foreman and Aaron Michaels for resurrecting the Panther under the first version of the new Black Panther Party that started out of Dallas, Texas. Those brothers started in 89, I believe it was. Is that right, War?
Yeah,
1989 as the Brothers
yeah.
in Black, and ended up evolving into the new Black Panther Party, and those are the brothers that actually brought Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad into the new Black Panther Party and started the very things that many people are struggling for, or fighting for, or even arguing against right now today. Those are the brothers. So brother David Foreman, one of our elders, has given us a nice quick blueprint in the comment section of our last video if y'all want to check that out. And brother David, we would love you to come on the show and detail or break down those ideas yourself personally. We would like that to be one of the caps of this series that we're doing. So anyway, we're at question number 7. Again, if you want to know where we at and what we're talking about, go watch the other videos. We went through a series of questions that lead us to coming up with ideas and solutions. That last video is the one, I think it's called Blueprint Part 3, Institution Building. But so we're gonna start today, and we're gonna kick it on off. The first question we're gonna endeavor to answer is, what are examples of measures that work against institution building? What are examples of measures that work against institution building? Who want to kick this off?
I jump in first. I like to start off on that one by just even going into the difference between white power and black power, because black power typically tends to mean us as black people having a chance to control our own lives, with the assumption that the playing field will be fair. And the only reason that we're not successful is that not enough of us are in the operation of trying to create black power. Well, on the other hand, white power is founded in the monopolistic ownership of production, land use, and commodity sectors. White people build institutions to prevent others from forming fully functional institutions. Whereas black people play by the rules, white people play to win, and they play to win at all costs. So to them, cheating is part of the game, which is why
Well,
we've had things like the black codes, Jim Crow, here recently the gutting of the voters' rights, redistricting, immigration policies, and so forth. They've implemented Willie Lynch, which is a perpetual weapon that is able to be generationally carried forward and enhanced on the upcoming generations, generation by generation. They deal with competition conditioning through sports, conquer and divide specifically through comfort distractions, despair, and white institutions incorporate war and chaos as part of a means of maintenance. The the elite are moving from positions of making intelligence a utility, which means the population is so dumb and AI becomes so saturated, embedded within all industries that people pay for access to something, pay for access to thinking as a necessity. We become conditioned to not even be able to control our own critical thought. And this is the position that we're moving into currently right now. So the thing is, as long as black people are viewing black power from the vantage point of victimization, and black power from the vantage point of that this environment is not an active war field or a battleground that is designed institutionally to keep others from being able to have a fair opportunity. As long as we keep thinking that this is a fair game, then to me, we're not we don't have the right approach. And that's what I consider to be the aspect that works against institution building, is that they have institutions that are built for the destruction and the preventing of other institutions. And we don't see that.
So basically, I'm hearing you saying that the big differences between white power and black power is that when you're dealing with white power, they play offense, and when you're dealing with black power, we play defense.
Yep.
They create institutions to make sure that they create institutions that kind of preempt even them really needing the defense because they try to make sure that you don't even step on the stage in the first place. That's what I heard from that.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, my point, were you done? Because I was gonna get some
Yeah.
points. If not, okay. I got 6 points to answer that question. Six. What are the examples of measures that work against institution building? My major keys that I build from, as I've said in every other video, I'm building from Blueprint for Black Power by Amos M. Wilson and Power Numbers by Dr. Claude Anderson. I'm basically coming mostly majority of everything that I come from is coming from their ideas in those two books. And my 6 points are coming from them in different ways. The first point is individualism over group interest. Again, this is what are examples of measures that work against institution building. For us, is individualism over group interest, consumerism without ownership, leadership ego and internal conflict, dependency on external systems, lack of discipline, and historical amnesia. I think those 6 points are the things that work against institution building. Amos and Wilson essentially argued that oppressed groups are psychologically conditioned to think as isolated individuals instead of organized collectives. And Dr. Claude Anderson repeatedly teaches in his book, no group becomes, direct quote, no group becomes powerful without economic cooperation. So the result of that is no pooling of money, no continuity, no group agenda. On the second one, consumerism without ownership, Dr. Claude Anderson, one of his main central critiques in the book Powernomics is spending without production, consumption without ownership, wealth leaving the community immediately. This is one of the major things that he talks about. He says that the measures that hurt institution building is excessive luxury consumption, no investment in culture, no land acquisition, no business infrastructure. My third is leadership, ego, and internal conflict. I think all of us, because all of us have been members of organizations at the grassroots level, I think we've all seen this. I think we've all recognized and observed this. And one of the things Huey once said was that he observed that movements collapse when personality overrides the mission and leaders compete instead of organize. Uh, 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 Mute yourself a little bit.
My bad.
And so my guy Stokely Carmichael emphasized that disciplined political organization, not celebrity leadership. One of the things that one of the old speeches from back in the day that Huey said, and y'all done heard it because you heard Gil Scott Heron said, or was it the Lost Poets? It was one of them. I think it was Gil Scott Heron. They said the revolution would not be televised. That concept came from something that Huey said. Huey said that the revolution would not be televised because you had so many quote unquote revolutionaries in the 60s that was jumping in front of the camera. They wanted to be seen. And Huey once said in one of my favorite Panther books that I always quote and come from, The Black Panther Speaks by Philip S. Forney. He said in that book, Huey talks about he said that if you want to be famous, you need to go to Hollywood. A star's place is in Hollywood. A Panther's place is in the community. A revolutionary must understand that the revolution will not be televised. So when we start to understand that, we got to start to realize and understand that we can't focus ourselves on celebrity leadership or the image of one man. We even saw that in the new Black Panther Party when Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad came into the party. Number four, dependency on external systems. I think we all understand this. Amos and Wilson, he said dependency destroys strategic autonomy. And Dr. Khalid, and many of y'all, if you ever studied what the man said, instead of just being so amazed on what he said or how he said it, if you studied what he said, his biggest things was about being independent. So examples of depending entirely on outside schools, outside food systems, and outside banking and outside media narratives. As long as we're dependent on external systems, that you'll never be able to build those institutions. Next is lack of discipline. These are killers of anything. Basic institution killers. To have a lack of discipline to do the things that's needed to be done, because this is not a fire that you throw water on. Building an institution, trying to construct power, we've seen this a lot again in the movement. It's one of the reasons why I know me and we're not big on protesting anymore, because it's easy to get emotional, to jump out there and do something now and think I've done something, but the real things that move people to our power is going to take long term, and do anything long term, you got to be willing to do it when you're not emotional about it, meaning that you got to have discipline. The discipline to keep going and keep moving even when it seems like you're not making any progress. There's an old story Huey told actually in that same book I just quoted. Huey told a story. He got it from Chairman Mao, I believe, but he told a story about a he said there was a foolish man. And no, I'm lying. He didn't tell it in that book. He told it in Revolutionary Suicide. Matter of fact, it's the last chapter in Revolutionary Suicide, where Huey said there's a foolish man and there was a wise old man. And he said the foolish man was standing at a hill with a spoon, and he was digging at the hill, and he was throwing the dirt over, let's say, 7 or 8 feet over. And the wise man came by and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, the foolish man told the wise man, "I'm moving this hill with this spoon." He said, "Are you crazy? You can't move the hill with a spoon." And so the wise man walked off laughing. So the foolish man, he just kept going. He just kept going with his little spoon. He didn't stop. And by not stopping, he trained his children and his children's children to work at moving the hill with the spoon. And then they motivated and inspired other people to come along, and they start participating and moving the hill with the spoon. And finally, they start making a little bit of progress. And finally, the people in the community all started participating and trying to move the hill with the spoon, until finally the hill was moved. And what Huey was essentially saying is that the revolutionary is not the one who will move the hill. The revolutionary will just inspire the people to move the hill. But you got to keep going. You have to be a fool for the people. This is what Huey consistently talked about. And the last one, the sixth, was historical amnesia. This is something that Amos and Wilson consistently talked about, and Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad talked about, that we forget who we are. A people disconnected from their history repeats mistakes, lacks identity, and lacks continuity. So you cannot build institutions if you have these six things, in my opinion, working against you.
Well, I think when you look at that again and you combine that with what I just said about how they build institutions to prevent us from operating properly, that goes hand in hand. Because like kind of what you said in regards to the entertainers, we have to realize that entertainers are intentionally propped up as black leadership, so that we
Yeah.
are going in the wrong direction. And and from that standpoint, that those are just strategies that they use to prevent us from having proper maturity in terms of how we develop our our aspects of what black power is, by creating chaos, again operating through chaos and dysfunctionality, but promoting that as something positive. We get lost in the sauce in our recognition of what we're doing improperly, because we don't view it as a wrong method. So then what happens, going back to the Willie Lynch concept that I said, we perpetually create and build upon a dysfunctional structure in terms of calling something black power. And it just repeats and repeats and repeats. But all along, because you started off on the wrong foot, and because you use an outdated and wrong methodology to even build black power, we just tend to work against our own means. And that is what they institutionally help prop up.
True indeed. Let's E coming in. The next question, you have anything you want to build on that? Next question is, what are individual steps a person can take in the establishment of institution building? What are individual steps that a person can take in the establishment of institution building?
Well, to me, when I go look at that, it goes into the concept of embracing governance. One of the biggest issues we have is because, for the most part, we recognize how American politics and politics in general, in terms of the world establishment, is corrupt. Because of that, we tend to throw out the concept with the concept, like they say, baby with the bathwater. We tend to throw it out, but we have to be able to embrace self governance, and then family governance and community governance. We have to go back and realize that it's not the process itself; it's just the people that are in control of the system. And then we have to be able to establish community-based rites of passage programs for our children and for leadership building, which would counter the dysfunctional models that are in operation right now that Syke and myself just talked about. We have to be willing, able, and ready to transform into a life of sacrifice, dignity, vocational training, unions, and leadership roles as a way of life. Then the last point I will make on that is investing in trading with African nations, including places like Haiti, Brazil, and Jamaica. We have to have legitimate businesses that are dealing with the trade on the African continent, and building power that way. And that can't just simply be us having a whole lot of businesses that deal with artifacts or jewelry or something like that. But we need to build means of production.
Hmm. When I heard that question, I'm gonna tell you what I heard. Because we just, on the first question, one of the things that we recognize is that one of the things that keep us from building institutions is that we've been conditioned to operate as an individual and not a group. And Brother Amos Wilson and Claude Anderson said that that is hurtful because we have to operate as a group. Then this question is saying, okay, since we are trained to operate as individuals, what steps can the person take toward building those institutions? So the first thing is one of the things that E is always preaching about and saying is the first thing we have to develop a group mindset. Instead of thinking, how do I win alone? The question should be, how do we build a lasting structure? Because if the structure, when I remember E used to always say this, uh, and I'm gonna paraphrase it because I can't remember the direct quote, but it's if I'm on a boat. I could worry about how I'm gonna survive, this sea, or I can worry about how the boat would survive the sea. If the boat survives, I survive. If I survive, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that everybody else on the boat survive. So I need to focus my energy on making sure that the boat survives, because that guarantees my survival. And it also guarantees the continuity of me and my people. Another thing, this is something I truly believe in, is that every individual should acquire a skill, a useful skill. When I was on hiatus, that's one of the things that I constantly told the brothers. They gave two quote unquote free. Nothing is free because in my mind, you always got to measure it in the time you're having to spend in that particular institution. So that's what it costs. But they give you two free trades, vocational trades. Some brothers took those trades, and like Brother Pharaoh took a CDL trade, came home. That trade gave him the ability to create finances. I got a brother named George Jefferson who took a welding trade. That trade gave him ability to create finances. So I think a person has to develop a useful skill, and they got to ask themselves, what does a revolutionary organization need? A revolutionary organization needs educators, it needs organizers, it needs medics, it needs political theoreticians, it needs security, and it needs financial managers. So if you're serious about developing the strength of your organization, then you should dedicate your time and energy to developing those skills. One of our brothers here with the Panther 48 is developing his AI skills, which is beneficial to us because it gives us the ability to control our narrative. It gives us the ability to tell our story in our way. And he does that. He's always done it. Even before AI, he was doing it with newsletters. He was doing it in various ways. We was riding around with cassette tapes that he had took beats from popular rap music and then put Malcolm X Farrakhan and Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad speeches over them. So these are skills that we can use to give the message to the people in a way that the people are willing to accept it. Like I talked about the brothers that went and got the CDLs and the welding classes. One of the things I used to tell the brothers when I was down, when we was on hiatus, the reason why I thought that they should go get those trades, because when I was growing up as a youngster, I'm gonna use a little story. I used to hear stories about OG Pokey and OG JB. These were dudes I had never seen these guys. I'd never seen these guys in my life. Just think about it. If these guys was older than me and they went to prison when I was like 6, and then by the time they got home, I was 16. So by the time I stepped off the porch and was able to actually move around the neighborhood and they finally come home, I'm a teenager. So I was a kid when these dudes left. And so when these dudes came home, I was so amazed with these dudes. These dudes were superstars. These dudes were superstars of the hood. And anything these brothers would have gave me, I would have went with it. If they would have came to me with a 10-point platform, if they would have came to me with some supreme mathematics, I would have thought this was it. This the Bible them dudes just gave me. They didn't really have a lot to come give me. No shade on those brothers, but it's the condition we grew up in. And like I told the brothers when we was on hiatus, if those brothers would have came and taught me horticulture, they would have came and taught me welding. If they would have came and said, "Hey, these are skills that you use to build a community," instead of us talking about how we run our hood, let's start building our community, and this is how you do it. Let's grow watermelon, and then when the summer comes, would like we see them old people on the side of the road. We sit on the side of the road and pick up trucks full of watermelons, and we sell the watermelon, and we utilize that money. If they would have came with programs like that and taught that, that would have been beneficial to me. So I look at the brothers and I say, "You going to San Antonio? You going to Houston? You're going to Beaumont. Let's gain these skills and go back to our neighborhoods and go back to our communities and actually give them something they can use other than how to drink a 40 ounce without suds going in the bottle. Let's take some real skills, some practical skills." So for revolutionaries, I just gave y'all for other practical skills that the community needs is accounting, teaching, construction, media, like I talked about with Brother E, agriculture, and technology. We need those are skills that the people need. And and we also need to be able to contribute economically. An individual needs to be willing to contribute economically. If you're part of an organization, you need to be paying dues. You need to be trying to figure out a way to invest things for the organization to make more money, to create recurring funding. And our principle should be that if you don't fund it, you do not control it. If you can't fund it, you can't control it. Whoever's funding it, at some point, they're going to be able to call you and call up on you to take an act. And if you want to maintain that funding, you might be willing to bend your principles to a degree. We talked about discipline earlier. This is something that we saw a lack of and a weakness in when we was building, a lack of discipline. That discipline is going to be important in order for the individual to add value to the institution. Remember, we talking about what can an individual bring, and that discipline is one of the most important things. When I was on hiatus, if a brother did not make it to the build on time, I'd tell him to try it again next week. If the brother that couldn't get out the door on the right at time, I'd tell him try it again in the morning. And I wasn't being a butthole. I was trying to instill something in brothers. And I think a lot of those brothers got it. Brothers like I use Brother Rich. Brothers like Brother Rich was never late. Never failed to get out of that door. Never failed to get to that table. He was at the study table an hour before we actually had to be there because they understood how serious this was. And this is how serious we got to be about our liberation. We got to be disciplined. We got to be on time. We got to complete our assignments. We have to control our emotions, and we have to respectfully follow the structure. Man, you will fail to realize how much power being able to follow a structure gives you. I remember one time we was on the yard, we was working out, we was training. We had a little brother named C Real out of Highland Hills. The little brother, I can't remember what he did because it was so long ago. Whatever it was he did, we had a little punishment we used to do. And one of those things was we'd say, touch every corner. And what that mean is your punishment was you had to run the entirety of the yard. And every time you saw a sidewalk, you had to bring 5 push-ups. Now that meant that if it's 10 sidewalks, you have to take off running. The first one, you bring 5 push-ups. Second one, you bring 10. Third one, you bring 15. Fourth one, you bring 20. It mean it increased by 5 every time you saw a sidewalk. Every time you went from grass to sidewalk, you increased your push-ups by 5. See, Real didn't argue. He didn't fuss. He didn't say, you can't tell me what to do. He took off. He followed the structure. And this is the important of it. Members of a Mexican gang that was standing by watching this, they say, Holmes, look at him. He didn't even argue. They looked at that with amazement that he listened to the order and he followed it with no problem at all. You know what I'm saying? With no Another thing that individuals need to be able to do, need to be willing to do if they want to add to the institution, is they have to study power systems. Nipsey Hussle said, excuse my language, I study rich niggas moves like my homework. It's a reason he said that. He said, I study rich niggas moves like my homework. Jay-Z said in the song, don't study me, homie, follow my moves. I'm not a role model. What they're saying is you have to see what works and then study the people that have done the things that work. If they come from where you came from and they are where you're trying to go, look at the moves that they made. So you got to study other power systems, and success leaves clues. So you could mimic those power systems, in economics and politics and organization structure, in their propaganda and land control. You study these power systems and help build systems. Very important. Help build systems, not events. We in our movement toward trying to build or move toward freedom, we have a thing about creating events and not systems. We have a thing about we are good at creating events, but we very rarely create systems, and that's what lead us to not being able to do what it is that war is constantly saying we need to do, because it's important is develop continuity, because we're only creating events and not actual systems. Anybody got to want to build on that before we lead to the next question?
The question kind of pisses me off, generally speaking, because when I hear people ask that and all the information, I agree, everything you're saying, blah, 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 blah. What Brother David wrote, beautiful as it is, it's wonderful. Hashtag gorgeous Black Power. Wonderful. But it's all bullshit. Because when I hear people say, well, what can we do? What is the solution? Da, 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 da. What I actually interpret that to mean, after all of these years, what is it, 30 years of this shit? And y'all have heard the question over and over again, just like I've heard the question. And what I hear when people ask that question is, what needs to be done for them? What can I do to help them? There's this external perception that I, as a person, need to go over there and help Black people. When the reality of it is, all of this, all of it, 100%, can only come after the development of one's own self. None of this will stick. None of it will be beneficial. None of it will go anywhere without the number one thing, which is accountability. If someone is, and we tried, we attempted, or at least it was in my mind, years ago, we talked about, and I think maybe Psych was on hiatus, but I know War and I talked about making the party a revolutionary university. In other words, you come and you go back to an oldie but a goodie, you sit down and you shut the fuck up. That initial recognition and attention to fixing however fucked up you are is the first and really the only and ongoing thing that has to be addressed. We have money, Black folk. We have institutions, Black folk. But the vast majority of these institutions that have been built, of this money that's been made, is that it's feeding an individual mindset. Malcolm used to talk about how, or maybe it was Farrakhan, I think it was Malcolm. It was Malcolm. one of the issues that we have in trying to organize the people is we're trying to organize a people that are asleep. And we have to realize and point the finger at ourselves and constantly acknowledge that we are asleep, that we are broken, that we are messed up. And as we listen to those who have some of that experience, those who have tapped into what's before, and figure out and listen and hear and grow to understand what it is the community needs. We don't need more institutions. We don't need more money. Like I said, we've got those. We can pull up facts and figures all day long about how much money passes through the Black community. We can make a list and go through, and on this list put all of these Black-owned organizations or Black folks in top leadership CEO type roles within white institutions. But it don't mean shit. It doesn't mean a thing, because the mindset behind that money, the mindset behind those institutions are asleep. They're sleeping. And somebody with little money and no institution, but realizes what actually needs to be done is much more effective in doing that than somebody with all the money in the world, but no idea what they're supposed to be doing with it. Their purpose has been defined by an external manipulator as opposed to that it's within. So for me, the answer is always, with a big ass period at the end, you need to develop yourself. You have to go in and begin undoing the bullshit that has been done and continues to be done to you. The shit that you do to yourself and then turn around and do it to someone else. And I know I tend to be the more extreme, just a little bit, and I'm good with that. That's my purpose. That's my role. So it's always been, for me, you know, on Fight Club, I believe it's Fight Club, the dude goes to some gym or whatever, and he's trying to, well, it's actually built off the old stories from back in the Shaolin type days. The student would show up at the master's feet or at his door and ask to be a student, and the master would turn him down repeatedly. And it was a test for the master. Are you really determined to do this? Are you really dedicated to do this? That was always my attitude. If you're not dedicated enough to sit down, read a book, learn some things, and put yourself through the pain, the self-pain, and inflict more pain on self for the sake of doing this, then I don't really want to work with you. Maybe you can piece in on a barbecue here and there and whatever to make yourself feel like you're contributing, because that's ultimately what most people I found. And yes, I'm a cynic, but that's what I found is most people are trying to make themselves feel better instead of actually fix themselves. If you're wanting to fix yourself, you've got to sit down and shut up and continue to learn and begin to see yourself as you truly are. And I'm here to tell you, I ain't never met you. And most of us, I guess, that have seen this are in America. And if you came up Black in America, you were fucked up. There's no two ways around it. That's what it is, period. Mentally, you're fucked up. And so if you really want to correct what's wrong out there, you have to first start correcting what's wrong within. And as you correct what's wrong within, you gain a level of clarity that you can see what the community actually needs. You begin to be able to see those flaws and those deficits within the community and begin to address those. But most people refuse to do that. And so we have what we have now. People who are completely disconnected from one another, completely disconnected from the earth, completely disconnected from our purpose, completely disconnected from God, whose egos have been fed over the years so much that they think that their issues, hey, psych, back when we was running the streets doing the party work back in the day, you had bill problems, right?
Yeah.
You had money issues.
Yeah.
Now, if you hadn't been doing the party work, would you have still had the money issues?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
you having some personal issues, money, your girl, whatever it is, it's gonna be there. But it's like we're such babies when it comes to this. We're such infantile and just silly and stupid and come up with all types of excuses not to do it. I gotta go. You gotta go pay those bills regardless. So I don't want to hear that shit. I have money problems. War had relationship and money problems. We all have problems. But if you're not man enough, particularly men, but women as well, if you're not man and woman enough to say, you know what, I got those issues, but this over here, I still need to be addressing. If you can't step in that and sit down and listen and figure out, not for the sake of hurting your feelings, being told where you're fucking up, being told what you need to do, and learn what those things are, to hear them, to think about them, to dwell on them honestly, not this bullshit. You know, they got New Age and or what's it, the Aguilana lady, Van Zant, whatever her name is, that type of shit, Tony Robbins type of self improvement nonsense. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actual work of putting yourself through this pain for the sake of something. We're used to suffering just because. It's a totally different story when you suffer for a purpose, for a reason. So if we're not willing to do that, for me, I've never wanted, ever, y'all know, I'm telling the truth, to deal with somebody who is not willing to put themselves through that struggle. Because like I said, if you're not willing to put yourself through that struggle of developing self, how the hell are you going to put yourself through the trouble of developing something outside of yourself? Because that shit out there is a whole lot harder, a whole lot more difficult. You've never really suffered until you've tried to feed your own people only to have them spit in your face. That's pain. That's suffering. That's some shit that most people don't want to deal with. So to even get to that, you have to deal with spitting in your own face, putting your own ego to rest, committing revolutionary suicide, and acknowledging that who you were is not enough. You got to grow and be something different. So yeah, all of these things, and that's why, like I said, I'm not really piecing in a whole lot because we have all of that. We have the fucking blueprints. If nothing else, we got what David sent us. And the stuff that y'all, I ain't gonna say us, y'all have written over the years, because you know I don't like to write. Which y'all have written over the years, we got those fucking blueprints. And I think David said something to that degree in his comments. We've got it out there. You got to look and see what it is the community needs and build it. But before you can do that, you've got to see what it is you need and build that. So yeah, for me, you know, if you're not gonna do that, and like I said, not for show, not so you can say, well, I read Doc Ben, or I read Amos Wilson, I read this and that. I don't give a shit. This is when a whole lot of people went to the Million Man March so that they could say that they went to the Million Man March. So shit like that, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually building, sitting up nights like me and Syke and War have done, sitting up late into the evening, going back and forth about these ideas and whatnot, and getting your ego trampled and learning what it is that's actually important and what it's actually saying, and letting those things begin to permeate and teach you how to think. Not feel, but think. So yeah, if you can't do that, I don't really have time for it. Especially these days. I got chickens that actually are more productive than the Black community as a collective, because my chickens know who the hell they are. You know, I lay eggs. That's what I do. So they lay eggs. But Black folk can't figure out that we're creators. We are builders, and all of this is second nature. We know how to build institutions. We fucking invented institutions. So for me, it's not a matter of learning that so much. That's easy. That can be picked up. The hard part is what it is I've always been interested in. So yeah.
And he is not incorrect. He is not incorrect. To make it short, none of the solutions I'm giving did I make up off the top of my head. I actually, when the question was asked, I grabbed the blueprint for Black Power and actually started going through that to find these solutions. Most of everything I'm giving, the foundation uh is blueprint for Black Power and Powernomics. So the manuals, the field manuals have been written. Now this is what I think that's important for revolutionaries to understand, because a revolutionary does not make revolution. The people make revolution. The revolutionary just prepares the people for making revolution. And what that means is the people are in a position where we don't understand these complex ideas. So the revolutionary's job is to go into these ideas, break them down in a way that's actually digestible for the people. That's our responsibility and our job. We have the ideas, we have the institutions. We just don't understand what we're looking at and how to utilize it. And he is right about another thing. We had an organization, I can't remember the name of the organization, but we have a video on our channel that cause we interviewed this organization. One of the main things was a brother and a sister that came on to represent the organization. And one of the main things they talked about is the idea that revolutionaries, community activists, people that want to see change, they operate like they are some kind of experts that are going into the community trying to teach those people over there how to do it, not understanding that we are the people. The people are we. We are trying to learn how to do it. We are trying to teach us how to do it. We are trying to guide ourselves toward liberation, not us separated from the people, because we don't got it. We don't have it all. I don't have it all. War don't have it all. E doesn't have it all. Part of the reason why we study and go into these books as much as we do is because we start to realize, check this out, and think, and anybody listening, just think about this. When you thought you knew it, you wasn't in these books like this. It wasn't until you realized I don't have a clue that you start searching in the first place. You realize I don't know what the hell is happening. I just know something's happening that ain't right, and I'm not getting the results that I want to see out of life. So I started digging, trying to figure out what else. He said I was having those financial problems. To me, those financial problems wasn't the biggest problems. To me, the house being shot up was the biggest problems. To me, our people killing themselves was the biggest problems. To me, the fact that I hated the dude that lived in East Dallas, that lived in the same conditions that I lived in, but because I was from South Dallas, he from East Dallas, was a problem to me, and I didn't understand where that problem came from, and I was trying to understand it. I was trying to understand it to get myself out of it. Same way when I had my heart broke as a youngster, I went into studying psychology because I wanted to know what love was and why this felt like this. I was trying to learn my way out of the situation. And so when you start to realize you don't have the answer, you start looking for the answer in other places. And this is why we try to lay out these type of blueprints and these points of views like this. One of the main things that I think where we failed at, and I said it earlier, is that we've gotten in the habit of thinking that the way to fix the problem is to create events, but we haven't created systems. We've been creating events, but not systems. Systems are continuous. Systems can be passed down, and I'm learning this because everything has to things cannot be on an island. You have to learn how to create what's the word I'm looking for? Understanding that everything works together. Everything works together. In my professional life, I'm learning the concepts, or I have learned the concepts of SOPs and why they're so important, standard operating procedures. Why those are so important? Because the next person that come in and has to drive a forklift or pick a product, we don't have to go all the way back to the beginning and develop it. We already have a standard operation process that a person can walk in the door and boom, we ready to go. We ready to roll. And this is what War is talking about with continuity. This is what we're talking about with systems. This is what we mean when we're talking about institutions. Because if you can walk in the door and there's a SOP to the police to police program, to feeding the children in the community, to developing liberation schools. If it's already done, we already know what to do. It doesn't matter if Dr. Khaled is not alive anymore, or War is not alive anymore, or Huey P. Newton is not alive anymore, or even if you never even knew who he was. If those systems are there and they're continuously being passed down through our generations as part of the culture, you'll never be without an institution and you'll never have to have these type of conversations again. This is what why our culture becomes so important. Unless y'all gonna say something else, I'm gonna ask the next question. What you got something on your mind?
Yeah, I just do real quick because I want to make sure people recognize that this kind of goes back to what we started with one of the things I brought up in the first question. I think we have to also go into this realizing that part of what white people do in terms of their institution building is to develop institutions that are meant to cripple our ability to have a functioning institution. So to me, no matter what we try to build, if they got something that's in place that's designed to alter your ability to build something and we don't have any forms of offensive, like you stated earlier, forms of offensive measures to address that, then we're going to always be on the defensive. And us always being on the defensive mean that we won't establish rites of passage programs, which is in essence what you're talking about. Having SOPs, if we take that back to a collective community standpoint, what we will have in place is rites of passage programs for our youth that will automatically put them in a mindset of wanting to be accountable to the development and the operation of their Black community. Why? Because they see that obligation. That goes back to what he used to talk about a lot and still talks a lot when he talked about OBU. The rites of passage operation for OBU means that when you graduate, you have an obligation to come back to that same community and help rebuild the structure and create that continuity for the next generation and the next generation that's built within that structure. And so the thing about that is that is what rites of passage does. It ties you and creates the bind to you back to your to having an obligation to your community and making sure the next generation is able to do the same thing. But when we don't recognize that there is an active attack on our ability to be able to do these things, and we operate from the standpoint of realizing there has to be consequences or an offense to destroy the active destruction of our ability to be able to have something intact, then I think we're missing the mark. Because no matter what we build, if we're not creating a measure to keep it going, then it's only going to last for a certain amount of time. I was in a meeting yesterday dealing with African Liberation Day, and an elder brought that up because one of several things several people on the panel talked about having a rites of passage program, an active rites of passage program, an active liberation school. And then the elder stood up after that and said, by the way, did you know we had this, and this 10 years ago? We had it 20 years ago. But what happened? He said, what we keep failing to do is to go back and find and build with one another generationally to find out why it is not had not been able to maintain. Why did the Liberation School fail? Why did the people not get behind it and support it? Why did we drop off? And address how we continue to allow ourselves to be under attack by each other, as well as by through the system, and these institutions that we build are not able to have that continuity. See, it's one thing to have the mentality to create it. It's another thing to be able to fortify it so that it is generationally able to maintain and grow. Not just simply maintain, but it has to be able to grow as well. So we have to be able to realize that that component must be integrated within whatever it is that we're talking about building. So I just needed to make that point.
Our next question that we're moving to: what are examples of collective short-term and long-term steps in developing an institution? And let me go back real quick. I ain't gonna take too long. It's what I said on our last video when I was reading the book or going through the book to get some bits and pieces to develop on when I was reading the book Who Are We by Dr. Kurt Harrod that I always reference. And in the book, when I started to realize how important culture was and listening to nag for the last 20 years about culture, 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 I started to realize something. War just said it today that white people are good, or our open enemy has been great at developing institutions that make sure that your ability to develop an institution is being retarded, it's being hurt, it's being arrested, it's being stopped, ceased. And I started to realize that one of those things that they've done is they've created an environment that we as a people share and a collective experience that we share that actually developed a culture that to cope with that collective experience in that environment. Here's the problem. That environment was so negative, their collective experience was so negative that the coping mechanism, that anti-culture that we created to survive that is so destructive that it actually creates our own downfall. And it puts us in the positions where we are asking these questions and answering these questions because we that culture that we develop in, if you learn how to talk with what sounds like an educated word or use even my I ain't gonna say that, even a person that's very, very close to me. I was talking the other day. This person very close to me, very close to me. I was speaking the other day, did not mean to use big words, was not trying to sound smart. I was just talking. And that person told me, ain't no need for all of those psychological terms. That's what the person told me. And it just stopped me in the middle of my conversation because this is what type of culture we've created, where we are not even allowed to articulate ideals without that being criticized. Something's wrong with us if we do that. We are working against ourselves. And this is what we find ourselves in. And we're trying to work against us working against ourselves when our culture teaches us to work against ourselves. This is how hard this is. This is how difficult it is. But the next question, what are examples of collective short-term and long-term steps in developing an institution? What are examples of collective short-term and long-term steps in developing institution? That was a great question, War, I think, because anytime you create a goal, you got to create the short-term steps and the long-term steps of that goal. You got to really understand what it is going to take for you to dedicate to invest into producing what it is you're trying to produce. When I was teaching the brothers when we was in hiatus how to write goals instead of telling them goals, because I think people had heard that so much, I told them to write a personal constitution. That's what I called it because I wanted it to have a different meaning. I wanted it to hit differently. So when people hear that, writing goals and writing a personal constitution, that sounds like, man, that's some major stuff. And that's what I wanted it to be seen as. If this is my personal constitution, every decision I make in life is based off this. It has to be adding to this. It has to be moving toward this. Any decision that I make that can take away from this means that I'm hustling backwards. Everything I do has to be in line with the personal constitution. And in the personal constitution, I had to put what it is I'm trying to accomplish, what I believe about what I'm trying to accomplish, and what I'm willing to sacrifice in order to get it. If I don't understand that, then there is no reason for me to even put that on my constitution. What it is I want, what it is I believe about it, and what it is I'm willing to sacrifice to get it. There's work that is going to have to be put in. So there is short term and there's long term steps that we're going to have to take in order to develop institutions. What are some of those, brothers?
Well, to me, you hitting on those examples because the deal is for one, to me the key word is collective, and it's us having the mindset to basically know that we have to have foresight and vision in every process that we do. So when I'm drawing out a method that's going to operate and get myself from point A to point Z, that also has to include passing the baton and being able to reduplicate the same things that I'm learning from, that I'm growing with, and making sure that that is incorporated within my system so that the next person has the same ability and not that they're relearning this all over again. But that the continuity component and collective continuity component, let me say that, is baked within the process. So when we talk about that as it applies to accountable spending habits and keeping and being able to, hold on to my dollar, make my dollar stretch, that also has to apply to how I'm able to also make the dollar itself circulates within a community. So it's not just me, but from a collective standpoint, okay, well, as I'm working on how to deal with accountable spending, how do I do that within the community? Therefore, the entire apparatus is participating in a process. So when everybody, or should I say, my approach is to get everybody to be part of that ecosystem. Going back to something you mentioned earlier as to what the word is, it would be us having an ecosystem. Knowing that we have to operate within an ecosystem, that means that we have an intact function, an intact body of works taking place. So when I think about short-term and long-term steps to developing institutions, that means the way I approach the development of institutions has to be visionary enough to see that continuity has to be a part of that. Um, which also kind of goes into forming economic and resource collective groups, form funding tanks, educational programs, liberation schools, black partnerships, land purchases, land trusts, study, and embracing warfare. I got to end it by saying that we have to embrace warfare because, again, when we talk about black power, we don't look at the difference between our definition of black power and the definition of white power. The definition of black power is always seems to, I cannot say always, but most of the time it seems like we think this is a fair playing field. We seem to think that we're the only thing getting in our way, that they don't have institutions built to prevent our institutions from achieving anything. And so when we approach powernomics or power building with the mishap of thinking that there is not a active plan to prevent us from achieving success, then we're not gonna have continuity. That means continuity is not baked in our movement. So, like I was saying about the panel I was on yesterday, everybody steps up there and talks about my liberation school or my support system or my rites of passage program as if this is the first time it's been developed, as if what they're doing is not something that already been done before and then already showed success before and then already had students that have been successfully filtered through their program. Like they read a book for the first time, like the book I want to pull this out just real quick. This book right here that E had us read from, The Black Student's Guide to Positive Education, as if this copy was the first time this stuff has actually been documented in the book and made available to our people. So I'm following this blueprint. And in following this blueprint, I've established a liberation school. In establishing that liberation school, I actively got students that are becoming successful through that school. So here I am presenting it to the world as if it's the first time this has been presented to the world. What's with that, E? Go ahead.
Oh, so I saw this chick on Instagram. Actually, it was Threads. But this chick, bless her heart, she posted, hey, something, and I'm paraphrasing, we should start a group to get reparations for Black people. She went on to say, in fact, I'll even head up the group. And I'm just looking at it like, this is the first time you've heard of this? Or, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy to me how much we don't know about what's been done. What David used to like to say, we keep reinventing ways to fail, and for me, a short term is actually long term. Is when people, again, talk about doing something, they like to look at Malcolm, or if they bring up the example of Malcolm, it's always him being out giving speeches or him organizing and and that's great. That's all well and good. But let's really look at Malcolm. It's short term. He didn't start out organizing and getting people involved in all of that when he was locked up. One of the first things he did was to read the dictionary. Those big words that Psych, you were mentioning, the big words that Psych uses are the same big words that war abuses. And I say that to say war founded is not a fucking word. Stop saying that. It's 30 years I've been trying to teach y'all proper English, and so far Psych's the only one that's running with it. War just can't. When that speech, you was giving that speech, I was sitting there like, please, War, don't say peripheral, don't say founded. I need to get you a list of words that you need to leave alone until you get them intact. But Malcolm began reading the dictionary, and I used to have my oldest children, they would have a spiral. And in that spiral notebook, on each page, they would make 3 columns. The first column is whatever word was in question, a word they wanted to know about, or I gave them, or they heard, or whatever. The second column is what they thought it meant. They would write down whatever it is they associated being the meaning, contextually or whatever. And then the third one was they had to go into a dictionary, look that word up, and write down the definition. And this is absolutely, for me, one of the things that I worked on implementing in classes and whatnot over the years was knowing the words that we use. And again, that's the short-term goal for a lot of people. It becomes long-term because for me, I'm always, my ears out. When I hear a word, what does that word mean? I'll look it up or whatever, or make note of it, whatever it is. But we talked about this years ago. We can't even talk about our own liberation in terms that are of significance to us because we can only speak about our liberation in the oppressor's language. But knowing as much as we can of those words allows us to develop our ideas and to express our thoughts with a greater level of clarity. If you only know 5 words, you're gonna have a hard time talking about love or liberation or revolution, any of these other things. So developing your ability to express, but not just to express, but to think, because we think in words, or at least I typically tend to think in words. Pictures at times when I'm attempting to figure something out, it's words, having conversations, developing ideas through these words. So if your vocabulary is this limited, then your concept and your ability to understand the concept and understand those concepts is going to be just as limited. So for me, a short-term, goal that, again, as I said, becomes long-term, but definitely in the short term, is to get a dictionary. It's to read a few books. If you can't read, you get somebody to help you read. At this point in time, it shouldn't be embarrassing anymore with all the bullshit we watch on TV with people embarrassing themselves, shaking your ass for a few dollars on TV. And what's her name? Sukiyaki or whatever, arguing with some interviewer that she ain't no musician. She don't. She do music. This is what she's saying. I don't do magic. I make music. Why you call me a musician? I'm not that. She doesn't. Musician versus magician. You dumb fuck. But these are the people that we put up on pedestals and look to. So that is not shame and embarrassing. If that's okay, then telling somebody, "Hey, psych, I need some help with these words." In that movie, was it a Panther from years ago with Mario Van Peebles, was that young dude going to Kadeem Hardison, his character, and tell him, "I need you to type me up on some of these words because I want to read it, but I don't know what all these words mean." And developing our ability to think, because that's one of the things that's been taken from us and continues to be taken from us and held captive, is we can no longer think. So developing our ability to process information and knowing the words that are used. In Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, in 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that separate but equal was unconstitutional. And the states that were in violation were ordered to desegregate with all deliberate speed. And everybody's like, "Oh, we won, we won, we won." But when you look at the definitions of the word deliberate, one of the definitions of the word deliberate is slow. So in other words, Supreme Court said, "Yeah, it's wrong, but take your time. Don't worry about it. It's all good." And that's where they hide all of this shit, is in the words. That's why libraries are downplayed. And most of the libraries that I've been to, especially since I moved to Florida, have way more computers than they have books. So even just that idea, the beginnings of your personal liberation are in the books. That's why they want you to read, because the shit is there. It's written out for you. But we don't understand the words. We don't appreciate the words. We can't even, we're what are those? I've always been meaning to take you to task on this site. The pillars of civilization, what they have as a criteria for what is and is not a civilization. One of those pillars is a writing system. Shit being written down, right?
Yes.
Okay. That system was developed by the oppressor, and they put that in there because they're a writing people. We're an oral people. Traditionally we would have somebody like a Dave Chappelle almost, I forget what the English word is for it. I forget. But anyway, who were charged with keeping the oral history of our people, the stories of our beginnings, of our particular clique and whatnot, our particular tribe or whatever you want to call it. They kept the story. A griot, yeah. That's the French word. I forget, a giallo or something along those lines. I have to go back and see what my man says about it. But these folks were charged with keeping the oral history of our people, and they knew it and would run it down to just boom, 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 boom. You know, and when it was time for them to get ready to move to the next part of life, i.e., die, the children were assessed. Children were always assessed. And this is not all, but many of our cultures, children were selected based on their attributes that the elders in the community see. And if there was a child who was particularly fond of or showed some affinity for doing that type of thing, he would follow that child, that elder around and hear those stories. And that child will come up being charged with keeping those stories. We're an oral people, oral traditions. I met Yoruba priests that knew the history and could recite it, boom, 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 boom. But that pillar of writing things down comes from them. They don't do that. They write everything down. It's always crazy to me. How can you catch Hillary Clinton with all of these emails and whatnot? Why didn't she burn it? Why didn't she delete that shit? Because they write everything down. They keep everything written for whatever reason. That's the way they do. So us being able to develop, and we don't do that anymore. We don't have the oral tradition. We don't sit around and listen to our elders tell stories about when they met Malcolm or when they had coffee with Dr. King. Or, you know, I saw Huey one time and we had a conversation. It wasn't a long conversation. We left 15 minutes, blah, blah, blah. We don't do that anymore. And that's a part of the danger of this disconnect between the old and the new. You know, there's no tradition, there's no oral, there's nothing being passed down from generation to generation. And that's how we end up losing that. You know, rap is an oral tradition that comes from our oral tradition. It's what we do. So we don't have that established anymore. So developing our ability to speak and to have conversations, because we've lost that. There's a disconnect between alpha generation and everybody else that's wider than any of the past generations. You know, there's no desire there anymore to connect that. You know, they talk bad about Malcolm. They talk bad about Emmett. They talk bad about these ancestors because they have no clue and no concept, and they're tuned into some bullshit. So again, developing our ability to speak, to think in words and terms and thoughts and ideas to move us beyond the grunting of the caveman that we've been following for oh so long. So yeah, the short-term goal for me is to get your ass a dictionary, not Google. You can pull up a word on Google real nice and everything, but one of the problems with that is if you can always just pull out your phone and look something up, there's no commitment to retaining that shit. I can just pull it up and look it up real quick and go on about my business. Whereas if you had to sit down like we used to have to do back in the olden days and open a book and go through that book, read the book, maybe grab another book, look through that book, ask Psych which book he got that from so I can go get that book and look in that book and see if I can find that. We had to actually research, but they don't have to research anymore. They just pull it up with AI and it tells them whatever. So developing our ability to read and to investigate and to look, because it's all still there. Matter of fact, John Henry Clark was one of those griot type cats. That dude had a photographic memory and could tell you everything he ever read ever. It was wonderful when I was able to sit at his feet. Just the stuff he could come off the top of his head. It messed with me. But yeah, developing just something as basic, and that's fucked up that we're at a point in our history where the people who created or first funneled the word no longer have any respect, use, or love of the word.
I just want to add on to that because I made this point on the first question we asked, we talked about, but I just want to reiterate this. Intelligence.
What? You want to what? Whoa. You want to what?
I want to read I want to bring this up again. Let me say that.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Okay.
keep messing words up, okay? And I do some of that. Some of that is very intentional, okay? Because I believe in defining my own words. So going back to what I was saying, we have to remember that intelligence. This is the course that we're dealing with right now. Going back to weaponization, intelligence is being portrayed as a utility, and that basically is because the position is to dumb down the population by having AI embedded and saturated within all industries. This is meant to phase out critical consciousness of the masses. Therefore, people will need to pay for thinking, E. And I want us to realize that this is one of the main intentional weapons of AI that I don't think a lot of us are recognizing. Just like how you said, people walk around with this phone and they ask it so much, they depend on it so much to the point to where these systems themselves do all of the critical thinking and operating for the brain. So therefore, what we do is we start being more of a dumbed down population. So why would somebody walk around and want to read a book when basically they can ask their phone that question and get an instantaneous answer? So we become a condition to where we want our answers right there, right away, right now. And that what that does is that destroys our ability to deal with longevity, destroys our ability to think out something. And we go to a tool that is basically being engineered as a necessity that we will be paying for, a service that we will be paying for, which means that I no longer have the altitude to actually think for myself. And if I can't think for myself, how can I have that as part of a collective process? So the idea of somebody actually being able to memorize a phone number that they need to call. I mean, how many people have y'all ran into that can't even tell you their own phone number? I deal with this a lot. I ask somebody, what's your phone number? And they pick up their phone to actually figure out what that phone. I mean, you got to think about it. I know everybody done saw that example. So
Most definitely.
my own fucking phone number, people, yet alone my phone emergency contact numbers for people I need to be able to call in the event of emergency. See, we are dumbing ourselves down. And intelligence and critical thinking is becoming a what do you call it? A software or a application that is being paid out with a subscription. We are subscribing to our intelligence, folks. We're going to be paying for something to think for. We already are paying for something to do the work and do the thinking for us. This is a weapon. It obviously can be a tool, going back to what Syke mentioned. It is a tool, but these tools are being weaponized against us because we are not the one that are in control of how the tools are being deployed. So therefore, you can turn and weaponize anything. We're dealing with a society, when we talk about white power, we're dealing with a society that is intentionally weaponizing tools against the population. And when we talk about black power, we don't talk about weaponization. We don't talk about anti-weaponization. We just act like it's the only thing getting in the way of us is us being hard ass workers. And I got to bring that up again.
Well, before you jump in, real quick, I want to just for war. You must have seen the same clip I saw of the, was it the CEO of Anthropic said exactly the same thing. Eventually, thinking is going to be something that it's a service, like Uber Eats or some shit, like you said. So it's not just theorizing, thinking what's coming down. This is what they've said. Your thinking process will go through us. We're going to do the thinking for you. And because we are in the habit of allowing other people to do stuff for us, like a slave does, we're buying into it. All right, Syke, come back to me when you're done.
Well, I'm gonna Panther back on what he said earlier. He was 100% correct, but to correct one thing is I never agreed with Europeans' definition of what civilization was. I just reported I
Yeah.
always said that Europeans said that the elements of civilization is the written word, urbanization, the written word, urbanization, and agriculture. Where with us, the definition of civilization was agriculture and urbanization. We just saw it as that. We didn't see the written word as a prerequisite to it. And as he said, the reason why they find it so important, I even found realized that when I was on hiatus, going to somebody and just telling them something with your mouth didn't mean anything. But when you sat down and documented it, when you sat down and wrote a writ, it became powerful then. You could actually make things move in the institution when you learned how to write it. So they only see it as important as when it's being wrote down. And for civilization, when you understand civilization, one of the great debates about where civilization started is either on the Nile Valley, on the what's the other river? In What's the one that they in Mesopotamia? They like to say that civilization started in Mesopotamia
Yeah,
and
Euphrates.
civilization started in Euphrates, and they like to say and civilization started in the Nile. And the reason why they debate it is because they say that the Nile didn't have the written word, so they give it to Mesopotamia on the Euphrates. But the Nile we had pictograms to represent those ideas. And like E said, we valued the word so much we didn't want to write it down. We didn't want to write the word down, not because we couldn't write, to say, so to speak. If you look at the book Nile Valley Contribution to Civilization, you'll realize that the quote unquote alphabet, the written word, actually came from our pictograms. So our pictograms was the origin of the so-called letters that represent the word today. And all the word is a symbol of an ideal. When you look at the word CAT, there's nothing there that says cat actually. But the ideal of what a cat is has been transcribed to that word. So when you hear the word or when you read the word cat, the picture of a cat comes to mind. So we think in symbols. Everything we do, when we hear something, even you listening to me now, because you know this language, every word I speak makes you think of an ideal. So that symbol produces an ideal. So that's all it is. It's the symbol. We valued and we still do, and I'm gonna show you how even in modern day times we still do. We valued the ideal so much that we didn't always want to write it down in the fear that the wrong people would get hold of that ideal and misuse the ideal. You'll see that symbolically being expressed in the book of Revelations when it talks about it speaks about I can't remember the story completely, but it speaks about a dragon that's coming, and this dragon is trying to destroy the children of this virgin. And the virgin, it says that the ground itself opened up and it allowed the children to hide in the ground so that the dragon couldn't find them and kill them. This is only symbolically saying that the virgin represents the ancient mystery schools, the dragon was the European armies that was coming through the land trying to destroy that mystery and those teachings. It said the ground opened up, which means that ancient knowledge was hidden in metaphor so that the dragon couldn't destroy it. That's all it means. So we've always hid those ideals in ways that the enemy could not understand and easily identify. We've always did that. We're still doing that even today. In today's time, when you look at our so-called gangs, Crips, Bloods, Gangster Disciples, Vice Lords, the history is not actually supposed to be written down. Those who had the greater value in those groups and organizations was the ones that mentally knew those ideals and could verbally teach them to others. Those ideals are only supposed to be passed through certain people. That's why everybody didn't have them. People don't know the origin of the Crips. People don't know who those people were. Only the elders, only those who actually did the real work in the building are supposed to have those ideals. And nowadays in time, you can go online and look it up. Everybody couldn't have access to the supreme alphabet. Everybody couldn't have access to the supreme mathematics. Those things are supposed to be memorized, and then they're supposed to be spit verbatim. And you're checked and challenged on your ideal to spit it right. And if you say anything wrong, it was called mutating the original ideal, and you was producing or creating devils because you had to be able to create, you had to be able to maintain it word for word the way it had been passed down from generation to generation. In Islam, the reason why they say that you have the same Quran that the Prophet Muhammad has, because they have a system of a group of people called the Hafiz. I believe it's called the Hafiz. Hafiz for male, Hafiza for females. Children that was taught the Quran from first surah to the last verbatim, memorized it, and then every generation a group of Hafiz were taught the Quran to make sure that the Quran was never misinterpreted.
Mutated.
Yeah, that was ever mutated. So that idea still exists. It's still there, and like he was saying, we just done got away from it, but it's still there. We always express our culture. We always do it. When we were pouring out a little liquor, I had no idea it was libations. I didn't have a clue. But when I learned that, I was like, that was dumbfounding to me because it's something that has always been passed down in the neighborhood to us. And the first time I started teaching that to other brothers, they was dumbfounded, like, wow, because we still practicing that culture. We're still our expressions are still coming out. It's coming out of us because it's there in some way, form, or fashion. We just got to learn how to get back to it in many ways. So we're still verbally expressing those ideas. And to go back to civilization, the real true uh, only true element of civilization is truly agriculture. Because agriculture removed the idea to constantly have to move to follow food. Our people by nature was nomadic originally. They had to follow wherever the food was naturally growing and wherever the animals were migrating until we learned agriculture. When we learned agriculture, we could get stable because we had solved that first problem. Once we had solved that first problem, we wanted to pass that knowledge down. So then we started producing institutions in the place where we settled. And those first institutions was first temples. They was first temples. Then they became schools because in the temple was the school. And the purpose of the temple or the school was to pass our knowledge of agriculture down so that our people wouldn't have that first problem of finding a way to eat, basic survival. Then around that place where we settled, we started building cities, urbanization, which expressed that, which birthed the written word and everything else that human society has seen. But the very first true element of any civilization is agriculture, the ability to grow food. And that's why the first civilizations grew where there was rivers because the soil was right and plentiful for the growing of food because of those rivers there. They made the soil so moist and ready for the growth of food. That's why wherever you look at civilizations first being born, they was around rivers. So the true element of any civilization is truly just agriculture. That's the truth. Now, unless somebody gonna come on that, I was gonna go into my steps of answering that question that we started with.
I was just gonna say Book of Eli. You know, he had the book, all of this, but when it got to the end, when it all came to pass, he laid down and he said the shit because he had internalized it. And essentially, that's exactly what we're talking about. You can read, you can talk about, you can preach on the what is it, the Nguzo Saba, on the principles of Mod, and all of these other things. But until you begin to internalize them, it don't mean shit. And that was
True
for
indeed.
me something I looked for and got out of that. You know, I'm always trying to find something when I watch a movie. It's hard to turn
Yeah.
that shit off. But he internalized this book, you know, and maintained, you know, it was at one point he was on that bridge and saw some people getting messed up and he mumbled to himself something along the lines of it's not your business, or it's not your, basically telling himself to stay on the path, to
Yeah.
stay focused on what he was doing. That was a distraction. I've got to do this because he had internalized this book and was now this living word. You know, so that's what I pulled from that, and that's what it reminded me of when you were saying that. And agriculture being a culture of the earth is absolutely, for me, again, I would concur. That's the foundational element. You know, you have to be able to stop moving
Mhm.
around in order to put down roots. And it's those roots that give birth to all the rest of that shit. So developing that connection that we've completely lost. You know, agriculture now is about business. It ain't the same thing. You shouldn't even call it agriculture. And that's one of the reasons I do what I do. You know, I know where my eggs come from. You know, I know where my kale and my tomatoes and my potatoes, I know where they come from. And I put my hands on them. What's his name? George Washington Carver mentioned or talked about how, you know, when they would ask him, you know, how do you know how to do all of these things? Not just with the peanut, with all the things that he did. how do you know that? And his response was essentially he would go out, have conversation with the plants, and they would tell him what they needed to do. And that's not some hocus focus. That's not some voodoo type scary spooky shit. That's some real shit. You know, I'm at the point in my life I don't use utensils a whole lot. You know, if I have a salad, I'm eating my salad with my fingers, and that's us. The Europeans got into, you know, all of these forks and knives and all of that. We and you, they're still foods today. You know, the fufu and stuff like that, where you put your hands in it and you have a conversation. It's removed that fork, silly as it may seem, a fork and a knife that creates a distance, that creates energy or introduces energy into a conversation that's a gap between us and what it is we eat. We have to be able to close that gap so that we begin again to have a relationship, to have that respect, to be able to understand what it is we're talking about, what it is we're supposed to be doing. So yeah, I just want to throw that on there too.
True indeed. True indeed. All right. So the question I'm gonna get some short-term points, then going to some long-term points. Short term is have to define a clear mission. Uh, Amos and Wilson said confused organizations collapse. So you have to know what it is you're trying to do. You have to define what your mission is. You have to establish core leadership. You have to basically know your structure. That is extremely important. You have to create recurring meeting structure. You have to establish economic contribution, what our responsibilities are on an economic level. You have to launch one functional program. One of the things that War, I remember War, we did a show a few months ago, maybe a year ago, and War was constantly talking about a functional program. What is at least one functional program that chapters should be able to when we were talking about how to build Panther chapters, one of the things War was saying that they had to create functional programs. And on a long-term level, from 1 to 10 years, from short term, I'm thinking 0 to 12 months. Long term, I'm thinking 1 to 10 years. So on long term, y'all know this was coming. Y'all had to know that I was gonna say this. You have to acquire land and property. You have to have something to stand on. You have to, one of the main things War always preached, I'll never forget it, is that a chapter should have a headquarters if you're dealing with a chapter. If you're dealing, one of the things he loved about the OBU is that they had a school. One of the things he always consistently said is that instead of running out trying to get recruit new people, the people that already believe in these ideas need to come together and establish something firm right now. So you have to acquire land and property. You have to build something. You have to have a territory of some degree. You have to create economic ecosystems. War used the term ecosystem a while ago. You have to create economic ecosystem. I could tell War been in that powernomics real tough too, just by what he was saying earlier. I'm like, okay, War been in that Cloud Anderson, because I've been in that Cloud Anderson myself the last few months. But you have to create economic ecosystems. You have to build, yeah. You have to build businesses, supply chains, financial systems, and ownership networks. And it's not for the sake of just greed and capitalism. It's you have to understand, and he loved to say it, and it's very important to understand it, that people think economics and finance is interchangeable, and it's not. Finance is just one of the tools in economics. Economics is basically, if we was to give the most basic rudimentary definition that you could possibly give, is to define what we have, who needs it, when they're going to get it, and how we're going to distribute it. That's how you could define economics on a simple level. Economy comes from the Greek word economos, which means to manage a household. And the word husband literally means the household manager. So the true husband is an economist, and the economist is to manage the household. The purpose of manage, the word man in the word manage means to handle with care, to put your hands on it, to guide it. So the whole purpose of economics is to manage the household or to manage the resources that the people have and to utilize and manage it wisely and properly. We have to develop leadership pipelines. See, what Ward just talked about it, he just talked about it. We keep doing the same things over and over again because we have not created those quote unquote SOPs or that rites of passage. We have to develop leadership pipelines. That means that you got to understand that all institutions fail when the leadership is not reproduced. We got this Messiah in this complex where this one man, Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, Louis Farrakhan, Malcolm X, Huey P. Newton, this one person, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., has the plan. We all have to follow. And if he dies, we all fall apart. That's insane. You will never get free like that. That is insane. Matter of fact, to go back to the first thing I said, you got to know what the mission is. If we was to break down the Panther's mission in a quick, easy sentence, is to get free. That's the mission. The mission is to get free. Everything else is just adding, is just a component of trying to accomplish the mission. The mission is to get free. I think it was Stokely Carmichael. As a matter of fact, I don't think I know it was. Stokely Carmichael said the primary duty of a revolutionary is to create freedom. Many people think the primary duty of the revolutionary, the primary preoccupation, that's what he said, to quote him directly. He said the primary preoccupation of the revolutionary is to create freedom. Many think the primary preoccupation of the revolutionary is violence. Violence is not the primary preoccupation of the revolutionary. But violence is a response to the primary preoccupation of the revolutionary. Because, as Ward said earlier, you have a group of people that have created systems to make sure you can't create a system. You have a group of people that have created institutions to ensure you don't get free. And no two things can exist in one place at the exact same time. When they try, it'll produce friction. And that's where the violence comes from. But the primary preoccupation of a revolutionary is to produce freedom. So we have to create leadership pipelines, youth leaders, organizers, educators, and administrators. We have to produce this. This is necessary. War always, I can never forget it, remember a time that War did not believe that we are the leaders when we were supposed to be producing the next step of leaders. That is always the goal. That is always the purpose. He had his children, my children was out there as well. We had our children out there selling buttons, not because we needed more bodies selling buttons, but because we were trying to give them the experience. We were trying to let them see it. We wanted them to feel it. We didn't want them to read a book about it or see it on TV. We wanted them out there in black doing the work so that it actually was just a normal step. It was just a normal part of the process. It wasn't nothing they had to be trained to do. They just did it. And when they saw it, we wanted them to believe that when they saw other people not doing it, those people was the weird ones, and this is what's supposed to be done. This is just a normal part of life. We grew up doing this. This was the ideal we was trying to create. Uh, you have to create multiple connected institutions. You have to create multiple connected institutions. That's schools, business incubators, media outlets, food co-ops. They have to be connected to one another. They have to be moving and working together as a one whole structure. Those multiple institutions have to be focused together. When we created the new Black Panther Party and created the mechanism structure, all of those structures wasn't meant to live alone. We had too many members that were so focused on the defense. All they wanted was the defense. They didn't recognize the importance of the education. They didn't understand the importance of the economics. They didn't understand all of this has to go together. If all you got is defense, then you still don't got it. If all you got is education, you got a bunch of armchair revolutionaries sitting around waxing poetic about ideas. No, it all has to come together. It all has to move together. It all has to operate together. And then once again, we always got to go back to this because this is what makes it all work. Without this, it will not work. You have to establish cultural control. You have to establish cultural control. You have to control the narrative. You have to teach identity and you have to preserve historical memory. This is very important because culture, and I read it a million times in the last show we did, so I won't say it again, but go to the last show and I quote Dr. Kurt Harrod in the book Who Are We about the importance of culture and why it's so important for not only the group, but the individuals in that group to find their proper place in any society. Culture is very important. If you brothers got something to build on that, I'm going to ask the next question.
Good.
Oh, okay, next question. What are some infrastructure, excuse me, what are some infrastructural requirements to maintain a stable institution for long-term development and growth? What are some infrastructural requirements to maintain a stable institution for long-term development and growth? War.
I put here on this one, my position is the complete control of our wealth, which means having the means of engineering and production, the ability to protect our asset structures, which is what I kept emphasizing on, because white power monopolies have a plan in place to squeeze unwanted competitors out of business by locking out access to certain markets, selective regulation enforcement, and lowballing, portfolio manipulation, incentive tricks, and political corruption, and outright industry sabotage, because that's what they got. So, in saying that, we have to have infrastructure, institution, and architecture all working cohesively with identity, engineering, and blueprint as part of the working process and as part of the generational construction of those three components, which is infrastructure, institution, and architecture. Mind you, going back to what Psych talked about, that is the mechanisms. That's part of our mechanisms. The continuity core, which is what we call kinetic operational resistance and engagement, the continuity core is infrastructure, institution, and architecture. The life core is identity, engineering, and blueprinting. Because even going back to the panel I was a part of yesterday on African Liberation Day, it was one of the first things that was brought up is the importance of Black identity in anything that we do. If we do not have we do not have ourselves identified, and we don't have a intact cultural perspective on everything that we build, then what we're going to do is emulate the same negative destructive cultures, or subcultures, what I would say, that are in place that keep us where we are today. So identity, engineering, and blueprinting must be an intricate part of everything that we approach.
For any real long-term institution, you have to have, in my opinion, you have to have a government structure, you have to have economic infrastructure, you have to have a physical infrastructure, you have to have educational infrastructure, and you have to have a security infrastructure, a communication infrastructure, and a cultural infrastructure. And I'm gonna go into what I mean. This is kind of why uh the mechanism idea stood out so much to me back in the day when we were developing the new Black Panther Party. I was looking at what we was doing, and to make it make sense, it's kind of like the idea we always talked about. Uh, I can't remember who first brought this. Can't remember who first brought it to the table, but whoever it was, whichever one of y'all it was that put it on the table, it made me start doing this with every single idea that I come across, and it's why my brain could actually see that mechanism structure. One of y'all said way back in the day, 30 years ago, that you have to analyze the ideal. That means cut it into pieces, break it apart. Nobody takes a whole plate and eat it all at once. So we cut it into pieces, we break it down. Then you synthesize the ideal. After analyzing, breaking the idea down, breaking it down to its lowest common denominator, they break that boy down, understand every aspect of it. Then you put it back together. You synthesize it. We cut it into pieces, the steak into pieces. We eat it, and then it comes back together and does what it's supposed to do for the human body in the body, not back as the original steak, but as the nutrients that the steak is supposed to give us, the protein, the things that for the creatine and all those things that's supposed to come out of the steak. It does that for us, and so I started looking at our institutions in the same way. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh wow. Okay, we need a defense mechanism. We deal with defense. We deal with the security of our people. We deal with the security of ourselves. We need an information mechanism. We have to educate ourselves. One of our biggest problems, Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad said that we're dealing with a people of rhythm and spirit. So we lack correct information, but we also need correct inspiration. So that's what I saw when I saw the information mechanism. We need economics. So that we had our economic at the time we called it the finance mechanism, but our economic mechanism. And we need to connect ourselves to the people. So we created the community mechanism and the community liaison officer. So anybody or any institution has to have a governing body. You have to know where the buck stops. We have to have a quote unquote chain of command, a rule of succession, the leadership roles, what our bylaws are, what our because you got to understand that with our governance, chaos develops, corruption spreads, ego dominates. So we have to know what that structure looks like. We have to have that economic structure. We didn't talk a million times about it. Dr. Claude Anderson says that economic power sustains institutional life. So we're required to have a budget. We're required to maintain our books, to have a reserve and investment strategy, and we need recurring revenue constantly. I'm coming from power numbers with this. We have to have the physical infrastructure. War always talked about headquarters, headquarters, headquarters. We have to have the physical place, the operational space. It's one thing to say we're there. It's one thing to say we're there, but boy, if the people know they can go down to the church to go get something to eat. The people know this. The people know where the police department is at. The people need to know where the Panther headquarters is at, or whatever organization or institution you're building. They need a physical place to be able to walk in. So you need a building, you need classrooms, you need places where people can meet at. You're gonna love this, forms for your own food, and you need places to warehouse the things that you're building, that you're creating, and that you're developing for your people. You need these things. You need that educational infrastructure. Dr. Not Claude Anderson. Amos and Wilson constantly talked about psychological liberation requires educational systems. And one of E's biggest things back in the day was moving from just political education, even though we knew what political education meant, but we got to understand what words mean to our people. So we changed it from just political education class to political cultural education class to PCE classes because the people have to learn. He was just telling you, and he made a beautiful point that people love to talk about what Malcolm did with the ideological errors of Malcolm X. We're following Malcolm X, but the first thing Malcolm did was made sure that he understood the words he was reading. The very first step he took to becoming Malcolm X was to start fixing himself, was to start developing his own understanding, was to start purifying and refining his own mind. That was the first step. So we have to have the curriculum, we have to have teacher development, we have to have reading programs, and on hiatus we called it vocab rehab, where we refused to go past any word we didn't know. Then we broke that word down. I'm talking about we broke it down. We didn't just define it. That wasn't enough. We broke it down. Where did it come from? What is its origin? Why did it mean what it mean? And then you fail to realize how much power you gain once you truly understand the word. Huey P. Newton said, he said that power starts with the ability to define. That's what he said. Power starts with the ability to define phenomenon. Then you have the ability to make phenomenon act in the way that you desire it to. But you first have to be able to define phenomenon because that gives you control over phenomenon. Uh, 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 and political education, we have to understand politics. You need everybody to understand this. I ain't even going to go into why. The security infrastructure. I'm not going to go into why. Most of the people that came into the party back in the day came just for that. They didn't understand the importance of everything else. But security, you have to be able to defend what you're building. And you need your communication infrastructure, which E has always been a person that's been real big on trying to communicate what it was we were trying to develop to the people. You have to be able to have those media systems. It's why we started this YouTube channel, no matter how small the subscribership is, we believe that we have to be able to communicate these ideas ourselves. And for the people that are dedicated and serious, they'll learn these ideas. Maybe the next person that build off these ideas and then started, and they may take it a step further. We don't even care about whether or not we get rewarded. Ain't no rewards for this, for these ideas, as long as the ideas get out. The cultural infrastructure is very necessary because that's where your continuity comes from. That's how it's passed down. When you have that culture, you have to have, and this gonna sound and I hate using these words because a lot of times people don't know what these words mean, but you have to have rituals. You have to have symbols. A ritual was every Thursday night at 7 o'clock was a political education class over on Cedar Crest. That was a ritual. We knew where to be. We knew how the class started. We knew that was a ritual. Anything that you do on the regular around the same time, on the same exact day, in the same exact way, praying over your food before you eat is a ritual. Praying before you go to bed at night is a ritual. These are things that we have to keep going. The language, the values, and the rites of passage. And that with that one, I'm gonna give the E. I see E rocking, so E got an ideal on his head.
No, just to further reiterate, to emphasize, at least one of those is with the communication, the education, inspiration, and all of that. You end up controlling was a buzzword. The narrative, developing, and I think to whatever degree, one degree or another, still to this day, but I know especially back then, cats like John Henry Clark and Ishaka Musa Barashango, Malcolm, for us, these were rock stars. These are cats that if they came to town, it's like, yo, we got to go, see this dude, all of that. The way, not necessarily the way cats freak out over Nikki or whatever, but that same sort of, wow, like this is somebody I've read and seen and all of this, and now they're here in the flesh, and I get to go actually be around and see and all of that. And so, having said that, that's why for me, the video shorts have gotten to be and I'm arrogant, I don't give a shit. But propping up those who do this work as rock star-esque figures. Psych, as far as I know, don't run around town in long underwear and a cape, flying through the sky and whatnot, trying to save Black folk. But we're the X-Men. You know what I'm saying? We are the Black Panther. When that movie came out, first thing when I talked to my oldest daughter, she was living out here with me at the time. She was like, I knew you was waiting. I was like, yeah, I've been waiting for my own movie for all of these years. My movie. This is it better be good, because this is, this is what I've been looking for, And I say I'm arrogant because we all, even Malcolm said, every man likes to be patted on the back and told he's doing a good job. Even dumbass, what's his name, Steve Harvey, in that book, whatever the book was, talked about you ain't got to do but three things for a man: feed him, fuck him, and tell him he's doing a good job. Pat your man on the back. Every man wants to be patted on the back. And so for me, just like everything else, that's our responsibility. I'm a pat us on the back. So when I do clips in my head, I'm looking at the personalities as I see them and making superheroes out of that. That's why Psych ain't no master swordsman that I know of, but that's the superhero. That's the superpower.
I've cut a lot of heads off in my time, though.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I'm sure you have. But
metaphorically.
that image,
Metaphorically. All the builders know what I'm talking about.
And see, you mentioned something a while ago about.
And I had my head cut off. I think one of the first people to cut my head off was old E over there.
Word. But one of the things that you had mentioned a while ago in some of those videos, and I get it, I understand, I'm not trying to go back and forth about it. I tried to morph it a little bit to include that, but it was this idea of, I'm not just a fighter. I'm not just the warrior. But the reality of it is, number one, that's the personality. Whether you want it or not, that's your amongst the three of us, that's who you are. And we all know amongst the three of us that a real warrior, a good warrior, is an educated warrior. So amongst us, it goes without saying, if this dude is out there fighting the fight and this is his image and whatnot, I know he knows what he's talking about, because that's our tradition. Warriors don't go off to die not knowing what it, or to kill, not knowing what they're killing for, or what they're dying for. So and for me, I don't dress like that. That's not at all. But that's one of those alter ego things. So developing those narratives and making heroes out of John Henry Clark, out of Chancellor Williams. And yes, my ego says we've earned that shit. I don't give a damn what anybody wants to comment and say. You propping up yourselves, or you being arrogant, or you think you this and all of that. Yes, Roy ain't never going to admit it or acknowledge it or nothing, because he's the consummate, I'm humble, Fuck that. You know what I'm saying? We are superheroes in this shit because we've done what superheroes do. We've given up what we're supposed to give up in order to pursue what it is we are compelled to pursue. So controlling that narrative and taking that power away from the Drakes of the world and cats like them, because they're propped up for nothing, for being, tools of the system and whatnot. So in my mind, we may not have a generation to look back and talk about what we've done, not just for our ego, but yes, for our ego, because I would love to be remembered as, sincere, as somebody who fought the good fight. I would love to have that. So, but we may not have that. Next generation may fuck them niggas, which is already happening. So rather than leave it to somebody else, for us, that's the narrative that I try to push. Taking control of those words, of that image, of the information and the inspiration, and putting it to work for what it is we're working on. If we was just out trying to get paid and laid, I wouldn't be with it. For one, it ain't original. So I just have no interest. It bores me. But developing a scenario where we're cartoon characters, developing based on our stories, what we've gone through, what we've done, what it is we've given up, sacrificed, or worked toward, and all of that. In my mind, if it don't come from nobody else but the three of us, is deserved to have that little bit of a pat on the back. I ain't asking for money. I ain't asking for, none of that. None of the trivial things that people often want to connect it with. But yes, damn it, our narrative is we've been superheroes in the game. Fuck what you heard. What was it David said when we got back from Jasper? Y'all some bad motherfuckers. And I know at the time, none of us looked at it like that. We was just like, well, fuck it. We kind of failed, but it was da-da-da-da-da-da. But David had to get into our heads and let us know, no, that was some superhero shit, dog. So that's all I'm doing is taking that and attempting to push our narrative that we deserve whatever pat on the back it is. And if that pat on the back has to come from the three of us standing in a fucking circle, patting each other on the back, I'll pat Syke while he pats War, while he pats my back and say, good job, then that's what it's going to be. But that's a part of the inspiration and the information and ultimately controlling our narrative.
Okay, we're at the last question. This is the final question that closes off our series. This last question is, why should we connect the resources of land to the acquisition? Excuse me, my bad. Some distracted me. It's the last question is,
My bad.
why should we connect the resource of land to the equation of solutions? This is one of the most important questions of all. Why should we connect the resource of land to the equation of solutions? Brother Ward, take the floor.
Let me see here. So when I think about that, it basically goes into land is the ultimate source of power, and it's the one thing that we have limited availability for. Land is the source of all of the resources that you need to have a civilization that is intact. So to me, when it comes to that, if you don't own the land, if you're not operating from a position of a land mass, then everything you do is borrowed or being paid for, or you paying for, period. We have to realize that land is the source of it. And when we have our land, when we have our control of that land, we develop our culture through means of that collective land use and that collective operation. I will say this, though, I do have to make this point simply because of the quote unquote Western mentality of land ownership. Going into the Native Americans, Kumbaya, the deal is no people should really can own land, so to speak. Because as long as you have the Western mentality of land ownership, then basically it's all about money. Because I'm going to take money and then I'm going to buy the land and then I'm going to buy you out and so on and so forth. And so therefore, the only people that truly will own land are the ones that have the economic means to buy the land. And that mentality also goes into play from the Western perspective, is that if you don't have the ability to prevent me from taking your land, then I rightfully deserve it. And we got to remember, this is the evilness that is being promoted and projected by Western society, is that If you can't keep me from taking your land, then I deserve your land. Because the bloodthirst and bloodlust and power hungry mentality that goes into that is where they are. So when we talk about being in control of our own land, we're not thinking a Western mentality. We're talking about just people recognizing that land is the ultimate resource that we have to operate from, which gives us that foundation to go from. And that's pretty much my take on that. I'm pretty sure E and Psych can dive into that more thoroughly.
What was the question?
Why should we connect the resource of land to the equation of the solutions? Why is land even important in this? Why is land part of the solution?
It seems so fundamental. I'm not sure how to answer that question. I mean, I don't. I mean, it, if if you're not able to stand, you don't have any land to stand on. But I don't understand how you expect to do anything else.
You know, one
I
of the oh, my bad, my
no,
bad.
go ahead, go ahead.
One of the
I'm trying to figure
ideas
life out.
that Malcolm, and I think I might be able to add to you, inspire you a little bit. One of the ideas that Malcolm built on, he touched me with this. And to keep in mind, this was in my lost state. I'm not gonna say lost. This was in the state that I was first being educated and woke up when I was first coming around brothers like Brother E, Brother War, Brother Isaiah, and many of the brothers that I'd heard new ideas from that was just, I mean, literally these was brand new concepts to me. And I remember one time, because Ed was the one that sat with me, we sat together and he played Malcolm X speeches and he played Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad speeches and interviews. And I'd listened to these ideas for the first time in my life. And I was like, wow, wow, I never thought like this. Malcolm said, he said that, that a, a who you identify yourself as is supposed to connect you to a language, to a food. I know, I think it was Dr. Collins that said this actually. It was Dr. Collins that said this. Who you identify yourself as, and he might have got it from Malcolm or reworded it in a way from Malcolm. But I actually first heard Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad say this, that what you identify yourself as is supposed to connect you to a land. It's supposed to connect you to a food. It's supposed to connect you to a language. It's supposed to connect you to something. If I say he's Chinese, you automatically think of a landmass. You automatically think of a type of food. You automatically think of a language. You automatically think of this. When you hear his name, that's what Dr. Collins said. He said, when you heard his name, if I tell you that Juan Espinosa is outside to see you, you automatically think of a land. You think of a language. You think of a food. He said, but if I tell you John Brown or Henry Johnson is outside to see you and you don't have your eyes on Henry Johnson, he said, you don't know if I'm talking about the slave or the slave master. He said, you don't know which one I'm speaking about. You don't know who I'm talking about. Land is the foundation of all power. It's the foundation of all things. This is the only resource that no one is creating any more of. Matter of fact, it is the resource that all resources are produced from. Land produces food, housing, economic leverage, and developmental opportunity. Land produces this, and this is what Europeans understood. And this is why Europeans went on a land grab when they came out of the caves. I've talked about this before. I'm not going to waste the rest of our time getting in full detail of this, but Europeans went through a what we call an extinction level event. They went through the something that was so catastrophic, that was so dominating in their history that it almost wiped them out. And it created a mindset. It produced a way of thinking that once that event was over with, they were so afraid of that event happening again that they started trying to galvanize our resources to try to secure themselves against this event. That event was the Ice Age. A good book to read to understand it a little bit more is The Iceman Inheritance by I think his name was Michael Bradley. That's one of the books you can read to get into that. But that event they went through is these people were stuck behind ice glaciers and their land was completely frozen. Sun was like wasn't even getting through. So there was no vegetation growing. Only thing left to eat was other flesh, was other things. So things was hunting you. You was hunting things. The land was trying to kill you. The weather was trying to kill you. The animals were trying to kill you. Everything was trying to kill you. So when this event was finally over with, and Europeans came out of these caves, and they came amongst people like the quote unquote native, the so-called Native Americans here in America, they came across the original men, the original people of the planet Earth in Africa. They came across the original man in Asia. They came across all these different people who was not living in that type of extreme environment, who had fruit and food growing on trees and water, well, as they rivers and things like this around them. Their thinking was, oh my God, I got to get all of that. So if that thing happens again, we're all right. Look at these crazy people. They don't understand what could possibly take place. We need to get it all. And then even when you own land now, this is how cool they are. Boy, let me take the word cool back, cause I want us to look at this. This is how strategic they are. That they say, okay, you can buy the land, but I'm always tax you for it. And at the moment you stop paying taxes, I'm gonna take the land back. Because nobody should ever actually have the land because it's the source of all power. So they built an ideal taxes into the ownership of land to make sure that in reality you never actually own the land. And so here's the thing, and even when they came to the indigenous people of this land, and they came to him and said, hey, I want to buy this land from you. The indigenous people are looking at themselves like, what's wrong with this fool? What do you mean buy the land? Because you got to understand what ideals mean. It's like somebody walking up to you saying, say, man, let me buy the sky from you. And then when you realize he's serious, you're gonna be like, this fool want to buy the sky? Man, this dude's crazy. Oh yeah, give me that $100. You can buy the sky. You because you don't think there's no way anybody is so insane that they think that they can own the sky. You take the $100, next thing you know, this guy is building a canopy over the planet to make sure you couldn't get access to the sky unless you paid rent for it. Now you start to realize how insane this person actually is. And that's what the indigenous people of this land went through because they didn't know that they were dealing with somebody who was serious about owning the land. They didn't know they were dealing with that. And so when we talking about land being is a part of the equation of our solutions. We're not, as the boy just said, we're not talking about owning the land or controlling the land. We're talking about having something you can stand on. If you own land, if you have land, you create a situation where you always talk about those eggs and those rabbits. You create a situation where you can now form, where you can grow your own food. Now you can control how you and your own people eat. You have an opportunity for business development, for schools. Dr. Umar been running around trying to find a place to build his schools. I don't know either here or there. I'm not going to go for or against, but I can see, knowing the history of this society that we're in, I can see that if you're really trying to build a school to educate people of African descent, how we can come up with all kind of red tape, all kind of red line, and all kind of tricks and plays to make sure that does not happen, because we will understand how dangerous that is. You have to understand the importance of the ownership of those types of the ownership of those type of resources. You have to understand how powerful land is. Land, as long as you cannot control land, you'll always be renting. As long as you're renting, somebody else has some level of control of it. Even to the point of just, even if we start out, because the first step, we always say when you're dealing with a Panther organization, is to have a headquarters. If you don't have your own headquarters, whenever your people have to physically meet, you have to find somebody else to allow you to have a space inside of their bookstore or their library or something. Please let me meet with my people in this place, other than having your own institution where you can bring your people to. It'll be so much more beautiful if you think about it. If people walked into, just like some of these churches, if people could walk into your headquarters, and your headquarters has offices for your chairman, your chief of staff, your ministers. Then it has classrooms for the different levels of schools of studies that's being taught. Then they have a gym for the training and physical development that you have going on. We go out to the back, and there's a whole farm out there in the back. The children are able to go out to the back and actually see watermelon, cantaloupe, cucumbers, onions, and peppers growing, and actually able to participate in the process, actually get to see some actual real animals. This changes the game. Now you ain't just talking anymore. Now, when you're talking all this liberation and freedom talk, you can actually show something for it. So this is why land becomes so important. This is why it becomes so powerful. Land actually starts turning these ideas into reality. Land starts turning that into reality. Your organization is no longer temporary. Your organization now is a foundation. It's a real thing. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I think that land is tied to the equation of these solutions that we've been given. And with that, I yield, y'all. That was it. I was done with that.
Yeah, that just reminded me of something. I don't. Maybe y'all. I think y'all both of y'all was aware of this back in the day when long time ago when we was young Panthers in Dallas. There was this brother that was actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, a drug dealer that lived in West Dallas that had bought up a whole block, and he bought up that block for the sake of having a black community. I think he sold weed, but the deal is he actually had a zoo. He actually had uh, uh, a educational structure to where we would be learning about Africa and different aspects of comedic sciences. I don't know if y'all remember that brother. I can't remember his damn name though. Y'all remember that back in West Dallas?
I don't.
Hell no. Motherfucker with a suit? No, I don't
Yeah,
remember that shit.
he had a little mini zoo. I thought I took y'all around him one time. He ended up obviously getting a lot of that ended up getting shut down. But yeah, he had a whole community. He basically bought up. It might have even been more than one block. It might have been two blocks. He bought up this area just for folks to be able to operate from. It was pretty impressive.
Hmm.
I can't remember his name. If I can think about it, I think he was African, brother. I want to say he was Jamaican. If I can remember his name, I'll bring it up and see what I can research on that.
All right. Well, it looks like we done brought this to a close. Uh, Hopefully we hear something from Brother David so we can go on and bring that final piece of the points that Brother David put in put in the comments for you true students that always ride with us. It's a very few. It's always a very few that's really doing the real work. So for you true students who always ride with us to the end of these videos, if you want to see the points that Brother David built on it, he said, Brother David essentially said the solution was simple. He said it was very, very simple. And with that, my final statement is just this: that to answer Dark Side's question, Dark, my answer is this: people become powerful when they control land, when they build institutions, when they organize economics, when they train disciplined leadership, and when they sustain culture across generations. That's the answer.
And you left off maintain a constant cultural redefining process within themselves.
Oh
Constant
yes,
study.
that's the first step, no doubt, no doubt. Nothing else, none of the other stuff we said can even happen without that, no doubt.
It, and so, in my final word to Brother Dark, I love you, but don't ask me this question no more. We same shit we've been saying for 30 years, bruh. So yeah, I don't want to talk about it no more.
And with that, this is your Panther 48. Peace and power.